Welcome, you beautiful bastards, to a brand new video. If there's one thing you need to know about me, is that I love video games. My very first gaming platform was the Nintendo 64, and my very first video game I played on it was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Ever since then, I was hooked on the role-playing genre. Sometimes when I'm driving home from work, I'll listen to a video game review of my favorite franchises, just to see what people are thinking about these games. I'll even read the comments, and they'll generally be mostly positive, if they do a good job in explaining their points and providing evidence for their criticism. I really do love reviews that last hours breaking down a particular game or movie. In fact, I'm currently working on a review of Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, and so far it's 3 hours long and I'm not even halfway done. The reason I mention all this is because sometimes I see reviews that make unfair criticisms. They sometimes use hyperbolic language and misinformation to over-exaggerate issues that the game has. Sometimes they'll present an issue with the game mechanics as if it's the game's fault, when in reality it is the player who is having the trouble due to lack of understanding or incompetence. We've all seen reviews like that, I'm sure.
Inconsistency haunts every corner of this game. Sometimes the music is beautiful, other times it's just loud and bombastic and grating. Sometimes the game looks beautiful, sometimes it looks like dog shit. Sometimes the controls are razor tight, other times they're slippery and imprecise.
For me, it doesn't have to do with like or disliking a product when it comes to me responding to a video. I tried to be as objective as possible, but we all have biases and personal preferences. During this new series, I'll try to keep that in mind while I attempt to explain exactly why I feel their criticisms are invalid, or if I agree. And that brings us to today's target. This is Acerthorn. He's a small member of the video game analysis community, who joined YouTube back in February 19, 2017. There is a lot of material to go through. However, there was one video that caught my eye as I was looking at this channel for response material. Morrowind's retrospective, Why Morrowind is Overrated. That is quite an interesting title. Now, I liked Morrowind the first time I played it last year. I enjoyed it for what it was and openly acknowledged its flaws. Now Ace, you've had to have known the title alone would have gotten you some backlash. But if you articulate your points well enough and provide reasonable criticisms, and provide evidence for those criticisms, then you shouldn't have any problem. From what I've seen, the Morrowind fanbase is relatively tame. They're just a bit elitist. But that's most of the gaming franchises when you really get down to it. Same goes for Fallout New Vegas fans who shit on anyone who enjoys Fallout 4. Now, this video is a retrospective. I want you guys to keep that in mind for later. Anyway, without further delay, let's get to the video.
Get ready to unsubscribe, ladies and gentlemen. No, seriously, hover your mouse over the unsubscribe button and get ready to click on it, because I'm about to commit an act of heresy within the Elder Scrolls community. Morrowind is not the best of the 3D Elder Scrolls games. In fact, I would even go as far as to say that it's the worst of the 3D Elder Scrolls games.
And we already have a problem. Not with what he said about Morrowind, just that the assumption that he's making is that particular hot take will kill his channel. As I said, most people will understand if your criticisms are valid, but coming out the gate with that attitude isn't going to help people see your side. You are low-key implying that Morrowind fans are a bunch of children that can't handle it when their special game gets ripped apart. Which is generally untrue because from what I've seen, fans are the first to criticize their own product. The only people I see gatekeeping Morrowind from valid criticism are just Ultra fans. Ultra fans who lash out at anyone or anything that seems to want to hurt what they love, because they don't know what else to do or how to articulate themselves properly. Some of these fans will defend their products like their lives depend on it, because to them, these pieces of media define who they are. And if you are attacking their game or movie, then you are essentially attacking them. But make no mistake, these people are a minority of a minority. So essentially, by what you're doing right now, you are A, validating them and their opinions by acknowledging them, and B, attributing most Morrowind fans to this behavior, neither of which help people see your point of view. You claimed Morrowind isn't the best Elder Scrolls game. In fact, you said it might even be the worst. Now that's a very bold statement. I really hope you can back that up. You're the guy making the claim, so the burden of proof is on you. Now, this video got ratioed, but not by much. And I don't exactly know what transpired after you posted this 2 years ago. but you're still here regardless. But considering how you started this video off, something tells me the dislikes aren't all just a bunch of blind haters.
First, I want everyone to know that this is all subjective and opinionated. You are absolutely free to disagree with me, as long as you're civil about it. If you provide well thought out and compelling counter-arguments, I may even respond to your comments. My discussion videos are for discussing things, so by all means feel free to contribute to this discussion.
Well, that's refreshing, because all too often I see reviewers act as though they're immune from criticism. They act as though their shit doesn't stink, so I appreciate you welcoming the discussion. I do as well. So if you feel the need to respond to my video with a comment or with another response video, you're more than welcome to it.
Second, Morrowind is not my first or even second Elder Scrolls game. Oblivion was my introduction to the Elder Scrolls franchise. When I got my first part-time job, I saved up my first couple of paychecks and bought myself an Xbox 360 and a copy of the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, and I have been hooked on the franchise ever since. After that, I played Skyrim, first on the Xbox 360 and later on the PC, once I upgraded my PC to be able to play it. After playing both Oblivion and Skyrim on both the Xbox 360 and PC, then and only then did I decide to give Morrowind a whirl.
Same here actually. Oblivion was my first Elder Scrolls game as well, and I always find myself coming back to it every year to do a full playthrough.
This puts me in a rather unique position among Elder Scrolls fans. I self-identify as a hardcore gamer.
Considering what I've seen from the Dark Souls playthrough you did, that's gonna be a doubt for me, dog.
Okay, this guy's attacks are kinda slow. And I am dead.
Will you cut that out?
But at the same time, I have the ability to critique Morrowind from a purely non-nostalgic perspective. 99% of Elder Scrolls fans fall into one of two categories. Either Skyrim is their first and only Elder Scrolls game and they self-identify as casual gamers, or they self-identify as hardcore gamers but started playing Morrowind much sooner than I did, at which point they have a lot more nostalgia for the game than I do, and it is common knowledge that nostalgia has a tendency to impact one's perception of the game.
Oh yeah? Well, so did I. You're not special because you played Morrowind last. You aren't any more or less informed or objective just because you didn't play this game when you were young. And that's going to become more apparent as this video goes on. Now, I agree that nostalgia can alter a person's perspective on the things they criticize. It can make people think the piece of media that they're reviewing is better than it is. However, that blade cuts both ways. Because people can have nostalgic feelings of fondness for a particular franchise, and later find out that it wasn't as great as they remember. Having you be able to see its flaws and having the knowledge and experience from playing it when it was first released, it gives you more perspective on the game and potentially makes you more objective than someone who hasn't played it till later. Someone doing a blind retrospective can be just as susceptible to their biases, from being spoiled by modern controls, enhanced graphics, and current gameplay mechanics. Putting someone like you and me exactly in the same spot as the nostalgic blind fans, just on the opposite end of the conversation. It's really about how you use nostalgia, and it's fine to be nostalgic as long as you aren't completely blinded by it. The only difference between us in this scenario is I didn't make a video called Morrowind Retrospective and claim that Morrowind is overrated. You did. I'm skipping the part where he talks about WWF No Mercy for the N64. His point is that he already had to rip apart games that are old, so he's got experience here, guys.
Before I get to the negativity that is promised in the title of this video, let me balance that out by explaining some of the things Morrowind does better than Oblivion and Skyrim. First, the fact that Daedric weapons and armor have fixed locations in the game, but are extremely rare, is a definite plus. You could, theoretically, acquire Daedric weapons and armor as early as level 1 if you already knew where they were, but that doesn't mean they were easy to come by. In addition to their rarity, they also have several other barriers around them. For example, Not counting DLC, there's only a single instance of the Daedric Cuirass in the game, and it was worn by an NPC who was as important to the several quests, making it highly inadvisable to just walk up and kill him to get the Daedric Cuirass, even if you physically could. Speaking of which, my next point. While this may seem like I'm beating a dead horse, I definitely like the fact that you can kill everyone, even quest-specific characters. The fact that you can kill them, but it's not recommended you do so because they could be involved in a quest later down the line, is an excuse for the player to exercise self-restraint. The idea of your actions having consequences is a concept that has sorely been lost on Bethesda, and not just through the inability to kill people, but also through the inability to fail certain quests or permanently alienate your relationship with NPCs.
As much as I kind of appreciate you trying to say something nice about Morrowind, could you not edit out your mistakes or do another take perhaps? This doesn't take away from any of your points, it's just really distracting. Speaking of distracting, could you not cut out your breathing as well? Your breathing is so heavy that I can smell it from my screen. Again, this has absolutely nothing to do with your points, but you could have, given a shit about the video you wanted to make. But I get it. Your criticisms are supposed to be all that matter. As long as you do that well enough, we can ignore everything else. Well, let's just see if you deliver on that front at least.
However, I do not like the ability to kill god characters like Vivek, or immortals like Yeager and Bagarn. These people actually have an in-universe excuse for being unkillable, and the fact that they can die by your mortal hand as easily as any common creature, save for the fact that they have a much higher health than most other creatures, is almost as immersion-breaking as Oblivion and Skyrim's inability to kill quest characters.
No. There are actually objective reasons in universe why you can kill these people. Yagrim Barum is afflicted with corpus disease, which makes him immune to aging, not dying. Vivek's a god, but if you destroy the heart of Lorcan, he loses his immortality, in turn making him killable. Does that make sense? I'm not really sure. Does it make sense that you're able to defeat the Daedric Prince of Destruction in Elder Scrolls Oblivion using the Amulet of Kings? Anyway, the heart is the source of Vivek's immortality. Kind of like the heart in the bed of chaos in Dark Souls. Oh, never mind, you didn't play that far. Wait. What did you just say? Hold on, go back.
And the fact that they can die by your mortal hand as easily as any common creature, save for the fact that they have a much higher health than most other creatures.
Okay, first of all, alright, I'll let you say that about Yagrim Bottom. He's a total fucking pussy. But Vivek isn't as easy to kill as any other creature. If anything, he is the opposite. In fact, I'll prove it to you. Here's a video where someone is fighting Vivek with maxed out armor and lots of enchantments, but barely survives only because they have a bunch of healing potions. Here's another video where a man drinks Sujamud that gives him 50 points of strength at the expense of 50 points of intelligence. In Morrowind, these effects stack, so he gave himself 7.5 thousand strength in order to kill him in one hit. He had to drink 150 bottles of Sujamud just to do this, which is not an easy feat to gather or craft in Morrowind. And there's this last video where I saw a guy give himself maximum enchantments to the point where he resists all status effects and all magic damage, and simultaneously reflects all spell damage back at Vivek. In short, you have to make yourself into a god in order to even stand a chance against another. To say you can just kill him like you can kill a rat or a scrib is just absolutely asinine. You just can't walk up to him and kill him. You need to do specific things in order to even attempt at it, unlike every other enemy in the game. I don't want to harp on this too long, but you are objectively wrong here, and it shows a complete lack of care when you claim things without the slightest bit of research or investigation. Please try to hold yourself to a higher standard.
I also like the short and sweet game intro. The tutorial quest, which takes place entirely within Satanin's census office, is over in about 10 minutes. Once you step outside into Satanin proper, you are free to do whatever you want, to go wherever you want, all throughout the game map. This is in stark contrast to every other tutorial in the franchise, each of which can take upwards of an hour to complete on a first playthrough. You may need such an elaborate tutorial on a first playthrough, but on a second playthrough or beyond, it's tedious and time-consuming.
I agree. I'm glad that we can get through the tutorial levels very quickly. I wish more Elder Scrolls games did this, but as they've gone on and on, they've gotten longer and longer. Thanks to mods though, you can skip all that bullshit.
Next, I definitely like the extra flexibility when it comes to enchanting your weapons and armor. In Oblivion and in Skyrim, buffs you give to your character via armor enchantments are always passive. Morrowind gives you the option of having enchanted gear that acts more like temporary spells that you can cast simply by equipping the items. Also, the fact that you can stack multiple enchantment effects onto the same enchantment is a huge boon to role-playing and designing a specific build.
I agree with this statement as well. That's it, move on. Next point.
So, now that I've appeased the Morrowind fanboys as best I can by giving some good points about this game, it's time I moved on to the thing that you came for when you saw the title of this video. Why exactly Morrowind is overrated, and the best place to start is the first thing you see in the game.
Wow, he really thinks he did something with that opening segment, trying to butter up rabid Morrowind fans. I got news for you, Ace. These rabid fanboys have already left a dislike and clicked off the video just from the title alone. I don't think they even got this far. Hell, I barely made it this far, and Morrowind is my least favorite Elder Scrolls.
I normally do not like to rip on a game for its graphics, because not only is it entirely superficial to judge a game based on its graphics, as the old adage goes, don't judge a book by its cover, but also the quality of the graphics are obviously going to be limited by the hardware and technology available at the time.
Remember this point. It is going to be very important later.
However, the Elder Scrolls games are in a unique position to be judged based on their graphics, because one of the primary draws of the Elder Scrolls franchise is open-world exploration. Bethesda prides themselves on giving the player the freedom, once you complete the tutorial, to just pick a direction and head out and explore. However, in order to make good on this promise, the overworld needs to be beautiful enough that you want to explore it.
I just wanted to let that play for a bit, because there's a lot to unpack here. I don't like to harp on graphics because that's superficial. Now listen to me explain why the graphics in Morrowind are bad. Look, Acer, the Elder Scrolls franchise isn't that special little bean that can be judged by graphics. Like every single video game made when we were kids, the graphics are gonna wane over time.
While this will obviously be tempered by the hardware limitations of the time, the overworld still needs to be beautiful from an artistic point of view. Now, I understand that the artistic quality of the game's graphics is 100% subjective. To that end, I defer you to the warning I gave at the beginning of this video. My primary complaint about the graphics in Morrowind is that there is too much brown. Now, I don't have a prejudice against the color brown, but I do have a prejudice against an Elder Scrolls overworld being predominantly one color. To encourage exploration, you need to give the player some variety of the things to find in the game, which means you need a wide variety of colors. Compare that to Oblivion's overworld. As soon as you step out in the tutorial sewers, you are met with an absolutely stunning glimpse at the overworld. Practically everything that was in the game's overworld was represented in some capacity in this one initial snapshot. You had the Gerald Mountains off in the distance, the white stone of the Iliad ruins sitting across a sparkling river, bookended on both sides by lush grass and flora. The rest of the overworld didn't disappoint either, because Cyrodiil is the geographic center of the continent on Tamriel. Its overworld boasts the biggest variety of landscapes in the entire franchise, with the Gerald Mountains to the north, marshlands in the southeast, golden plains in the southwest, and redwood forests in the center. Every place felt unique, and it felt rewarding just seeing every place in the overworld. Skyrim is only slightly behind Oblivion in terms of the artistic quality of its overworld. While there are some sections of its overworld that are predominantly white due to the high levels of snow and glaciers in those regions, those areas are generally restricted to mountaintops and the northernmost sections of the game map. For about 2/3 of the game map, despite not having the in-universe excuse of being the geographic center of the continent, Bethesda still managed to squeeze an impressive amount of variety out of Skyrim's landscape. About 2/3 of the game map boasts lush forests, majestic waterfalls, glistening lakes, and enough different colors of flora that you could make an oil painting entirely out of strategically placed flowers and then flying up to the sky and looking straight down.
You cannot be serious. Are you comparing a game that was made in 2002 to another game that was released 4 years and a console generation later to each other? Do I even need to explain why this is absolutely ridiculous? Okay, fine, I guess I will, to the people like Acerthorn, who think it's absolutely fine to compare palettes and graphical design between games in the same franchise from different generations that utilize different engines and have been released years apart from each other. With Skyrim releasing almost a decade later than Morrowind, Skyrim also got remastered 7 times, making it more and more visually stunning. This is a very unfair criticism. You just got done telling us how shallow it is to judge a game on its graphical limitations. Then without fail, compare games in the same franchise made generations apart running different levels of upgraded hardware on graphical design and palette variation. You thought that, you wrote that in the script, and you recorded it and released the video to YouTube. And in between any of those steps, you didn't catch the issue? That's literally like comparing different generations of iPhones. Yes. I don't normally compare the quality of pictures you can take with an iPhone because that's superficial. And I understand that the hardware is going to be limited by the technology available at the time. But iPhones are a special case because Apple prides itself on taking the most high quality pictures with the best lenses. So why can't the iPhone 5 take just as good pictures as the iPhone 6 and 7? I don't understand. You see how absolutely flawed that logic is? You can say that Morrowind's graphics are outdated and objectively worse than Oblivion and Skyrim, because that's true. But you can't make that a point against Morrowind, and that doesn't make its graphics bad just because you have higher quality games to compare to later on in the future. Its graphics were great for its time and have become outdated, as everything eventually does. Beauty fades over time, but quality is everlasting. That's why so many people come back to this game and still have a great time playing. To write that off as being nostalgia blind is taking an ignorant, unnuanced look at the human experience. This is a retrospective, for God's sakes. Try to take the retro into perspective.
Both Oblivion and Skyrim entice me to explore the overworld, just to see what Renaissance caliber landscape paintings I can find just by checking the other side of this boulder. But Morrowind? I have no incentive to go out and explore the overworld because I already know exactly what I'm gonna find. Just brown, and brown, and brown.
And what exactly is wrong with the color brown in a setting such as Morrowind? What, is it because it's boring? Here's a view of areas close to volcanoes. You see a lot of brown, don't you? There's a lot of interesting locations in Morrowind as well. And granted they are brown, but you still have yet to explain why that's bad. There was a limited color palette Morrowind had to work with in order to stay consistent with the overall surrounding environment. So, I'll relay the same question that I asked that cop that pulled me over last week. What exactly is wrong with being brown?
Now, I know what some of you were thinking. Morrowind can't have more variety in its landscape because the whole island is supposed to be nothing but a giant pile of volcanic ash. It's not suited for growing lush vegetation.
It's like he read my mind. Do I even need to be here if he's just gonna fall on his own sword like this?
To that I say, bullcrap. The island of Vardenfell is a fictional island on a fictional planet in a fictional universe. Bethesda may have written Vardenfell to be comprised entirely of volcanic ash, but they could have written this island to be literally anything they wanted. Simply using the volcanic ash excuse to justify the bland terrain is not a justification, it's a cop-out.
A cop-out? Really, dude? Okay, so if we had it your way, screw the lore and the story around the environment, and the struggles of the inhabitants that live in Morrowind due to the environmental problems. Screw all the plants and animals that look consistent to the environments they're in due to the Darwinistic pressures of the landscape. No, Morrowind's landscape is boring because there are no pretty flowers and waterfalls. Look, you can dislike the environments all you want, but there's a thing called visual storytelling. Visual storytelling is the process of telling a story using the surrounding environment without telling you directly what happened. With this, there's lots of opportunities for role-playing, allowing you to use your imagination and ask yourself difficult questions. When you go inside a destroyed apartment complex in Fallout New Vegas, and you see two skeletons on top of each other, that's an example of visual storytelling. In this moment, you may ask yourself, were they having sex because of the bombs were falling? Or were they oblivious to the bombs? Maybe they aren't lovers. Maybe the woman is a prostitute. Maybe they were having an affair. Maybe that's actually a same-sex couple, or one of them is transgendered, or both of them. It gives people a moment to reflect on the environment and create their own stories based on it. Game developers work very hard to put these sections in, and I appreciate it. Unfortunately, a lot of gamers just run inside, loot the 5 caps in the dresser next to the bed, then run out and complain that the place was boring. And it's absolutely fine to feel that way, to each their own, I suppose. Anyway, in Morrowind, Bethesda wanted to tell a story about a rancid, dying island of Dark Elf. Commoners just trying to survive in a harsh, unforgiving land filled with hostile creatures, horrible abominations, and opportunistic people trying to swindle you every chance they get. Despite the soil being covered in volcanic ash, the inhabitants have found a way to grow food as to not starve to death. But there isn't always enough food to go around, leaving some who can't afford it to starve or engage in theft to survive. Dealing with poachers is the least of your problems, because you'll get dangerous beasts or slavers visiting your farm periodically to take tribute, or to take you away to work for them for free. You are placed under armed guard and you have very little chance of escape. While you are trying to desperately avoid the whip, there are forces outside of your control or notice carrying out assassinations and coordinated thefts. As you progress in this world, you'll find most of the wildlife is inflicted with illnesses that can easily be spread amongst people, almost like a plague. It's almost as if there are powerful forces of nature that only wants the death of all living things. And while this is going on, powerful, unregulated mages conduct morally questionable experiments, being mostly detrimental to others only to increase their power and influence. Morrowind is a tale of hardship and suffrage, with a well-meaning but sometimes incompetent legion trying to generally keep the peace, with very little bits of corruption here and there. The Mages Guild and Fighters Guild are trying to maintain order as well, from either killing lawless marauders or taking out rogue mages. However, both these guilds have their corrupt leaders as well. In Morrowind, every day is a fight for survival. And to just dismiss all that, and say there's no excuse for anything being brown because Oblivion and Skyrim have more variation, is taking a very narrow, unnuanced view of art and storytelling. Not to mention the fact that during the development of Oblivion and Skyrim, Bethesda had a larger development team, more financial backing, the company wasn't at the threat of dying, so they had more time to develop the games. They were working with upgraded engines. There are a lot of factors at play, and to say Oblivion and Skyrim did it so why couldn't Morrowind, and making the implication that Bethesda was just being lazy is just wrong. Oblivion and Skyrim had literally every advantage to be better than Morrowind, but you make that a point against Morrowind, and it's not. Hey, older game, newer games are better than you. That's the fucking point of newer games.
As I said before, Skyrim has a nice variety of landscapes to entice you to explore. Bethesda could very easily have just used the fact that Skyrim is a tundra province as an excuse to cover everything in white. But they didn't. They chose to give us more variety, and they very easily could have done the same with Morrowind. The audio in this game can be separated into 3 different categories: music, sound effects, and voice acting. Again, this is entirely subjective, but I personally feel that Morrowind fails on all 3 accounts. The background music is totally serviceable if you were listening to it in a vacuum like on YouTube. The game's main theme, titled Nerevarine, invokes a sense of wonder and adventure and entices you to go out and explore, a feeling which the overworld graphics sadly fail to complement. My main gripe with the Morrowind score is that it sadly fails to adjust itself based on the situation you're in. Again, this is something that I primarily find fault with because I began the series with Oblivion, which did correct this deficiency. Oblivion has different soundtracks for peaceful environments, dungeons, and battles, while Skyrim has even more variety for even more specific situations, including having different music for regular fights and dragon fights. So perhaps my coming into the franchise in Oblivion and playing Morrowind so much later may have something to do with my perception of how Morrowind's soundtrack is presented. But then again, I would imagine the fact that Bethesda felt the need to include that in Oblivion in the first place is a testament to just how universally criticized Morrowind was for how it presented its soundtrack in the first place. I doubt Bethesda would have made that change unless they saw it as an improvement, so I can't possibly be alone in this regard.
I agree that the music doesn't always fit the situation you're in, and it can be jarring at times, but you have to understand audio takes up a lot of memory in game development, especially back in the day. For the developers to put everything they wanted in Morrowind, some tracks had to be left out in order to make the game. So Morrowind had to do the bare essentials. You're not exactly wrong here, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in.
For the sound effects, there is no way around it. They sound like complete ass. The sound effect for getting a skill up, which I use as the sound effect in this video to transition to new sections of the video, would be fine as a sound effect when you're increasing your magic skills, but it's immersion breaking, to put it mildly, when I hear this sound effect after an enemy has just hit me and given me an armor skill up, or when I've just taken fall damage and gotten an acrobatics skill up. Nearly every other sound effect in the game just feels either out of place or extremely generic. The whoosh and whick sound effects when you're swinging a sword and hitting an enemy respectively both fail on account of the fact that you always hear those exact same sound effects every time you do one of those actions. It would be a lot better if the game had about 20 to 30 different whoosh and whick sound effects and would randomly choose between them whenever the conditions for those sound effects were met. So with the background music being inappropriate for anything but peaceful moments, and the sound effects sounding like complete garbage, this game's last bastion of hope for having good audio lies with the voice acting, or what little there is of it. Morrowind has very limited voice acting, usually generic quibs spoken randomly whenever you're not in conversation with them. Okay, first of all, the male Dunmer voice is annoying. It sounds like their vocal cords are lined with sandpaper. Considering that this is the first voice you hear in the game, this game really doesn't put its best foot forward. Also, since Morrowind is the land of the Dunmer, the male Dunmer voice is the most common voice you hear in the game. As for the other voices, the voice actors themselves are far less annoying than the male Dunmer voice, but they still fail on account of the fact that they don't have enough variety in their randomly generated voice acting. I swear, if I hear another female Altmer saying, "First division, then the conjuration, this is unsettling," I'm gonna lose my mind.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. The Elder Scrolls franchise always did have awkward dialogue and delivery, especially in Oblivion where NPCs interacted with each other. It's actually pretty comical.
If you'll excuse me, I don't have time for you right now, or ever.
Anyone looking for work should consider the Fighters Guild. I hear they're always looking for recruits.
Good to know. Stop talking. How are you?
Been better. How about you?
I've been better.
That's too bad.
Have you heard any word about the other provinces?
Nothing I'd like to talk about.
Good to know. What's the news from the other parts of Tamriel?
Good day.
Goodbye.
Hail.
Have you seen Acerthorn around town lately?
No.
I have no more to say to you.
Oh, sorry to bother you.
Oh, hello.
Arena Geranus isn't the most social innkeeper in the world, but She runs a good, clean house.
Yes, the West Weald is a nice place. Just stay away from Irina when she's in a mood.
You think?
Do you think what happened to Kvatch could happen here?
No, no.
I have no more to say to you.
Oh, sorry to bother you.
So now that I've gotten the superficial problems out of the way, what do you say we talk about the parts of the game that are most important, like the gameplay? Combat in Morrowind is the most boring, dreadful experience I have ever had. Not just from the Elder Scrolls games, but from any RPG period. Morrowind's combat engine wants to be a CRPG, but without any party members or skills.
There are 27 skills in Morrowind and 50 companions/followers with their own skills, powers, and equipment. You are absolutely wrong. Which makes me question if you actually played the game for longer than an hour.
Isn't that kind of like being a platformer without a jump button?
There are platformers without jump buttons, such as Burger Time, Popeye, Space Panic for the arcade, just to name a few. These games were beloved for their gameplay in their time despite not having jump buttons and being platformers. You can make any limitation in a game work if you're skilled enough to do it. You need not follow any gaming conventions in order to make something good. In fact, you'll find more often than not going against those conventions will probably put you in high regard. I'm going to skip the part where Ace lectures us on what CRPGs are. If you are interested, the original video will be linked down below.
Morrowind uses a CRPG combat system, but doesn't have any of the factors that make CRPG combat fun. Morrowind's combat system never breaks away from that early game drudgery. Enemies have no weak spots, and so placement is important. There are no skills unless you're playing as a mage, no party members to make strategies with, and most of the fights are one-on-one.
You're right, there aren't weak points, but there are weaknesses that can easily be exploited. High Elves, Frost Astronauts, and Vampires have weaknesses to fire. Blighted Shulks, Disease Shulks, and Flame Astronauts are weak to frost. High Elves and Fabricants have a weakness to shock damage. And obviously, generally a heavily armed foe is easier to kill than someone who's wearing just clothes. Unless they are wearing armor underneath their robes, or they have a high unarmored level, which is a skill that Ace says doesn't exist. We already established that you can have a party member and there are skills in the game, so I'm just gonna move on.
If you're playing as a melee character, all combat will involve, from hour 1 to hour 100, is walking up to an enemy, mashing the attack button, and hoping the RNG plays out in your favor. Sure, after you get to a certain level with your melee skill of choice, you eventually reach the point where you have a 100% chance to score a hit, but that just means the pain is over quicker. It's still painful.
No, it isn't still painful, Acer. You are now skilled enough to beat the odds. This is how progression works. This isn't just in a game, it's how everything works in real life. When I first played Morrowind, I could barely get a fireball to cast before all my magicka was used up. After a few hours, I was raining advanced fireballs from the sky on my enemies. The same thing happens in Fallout New Vegas. And don't worry, I'll get to that fucking video soon.
Adding to the tedium is the fact that your chance of hitting your opponent is dependent on your fatigue levels. This wouldn't be so much of a problem except for one fatal flaw. Running in Morrowind drains your fatigue. While some may argue that this is realistic, the small amount of realism it offers is egregiously outweighed by its gameplay restrictions. Walking in Morrowind takes forever to get anywhere, so unless you have the patience of a saint, you're probably going to run to your next destination. But doing so means you have no fatigue for when you encounter an enemy. This means that a fight against a common rat can take several minutes because your lack of fatigue means it takes hundreds of swings to finally score a hit. The end result is a system of travel that is far too demanding on your patience and far too punishing on the player if you can't meet the demands. All of this could have been avoided with a simple tweak that running didn't drain your fatigue.
I agree with this point. I fucking hate the fact that fatigue is directly tailored to your chance to hit and your chance to cast. This is total bullshit and Bethesda dropped the ball on that.
Besides, is the realism offered by this game mechanic really worth it? This isn't a simulation game. In Fallout 4's survival mode, you have to balance your fatigue, but also a lot of other things. including your hunger and thirst. The fatigue and survival mode doesn't feel out of place because it is found alongside other realism-enhancing mechanics. In Morrowind, however, the game mechanic where running drains your fatigue appears to stick out like a sore thumb in a game where you never need to sleep or eat food to survive.
Yeah, you make a good point. The fatigue thing is universally hated in the Morrowind community. The fatigue issue can be beaten by drinking potions or resting, but you can't always tell when the next battle is coming. This system really hurts the experience for new and old players, which is why most people mod it out if they're able. I genuinely feel bad for ranged characters, because you can miss a shot from point blank range just because your character has the sleepies. It's really annoying and can get you killed when you really shouldn't have.
One of the most common praises that Morrowind receives is how it handles quest directions. Rather than giving you an immersion-breaking map marker to go towards, the game gives you directions, and it is up to the player to use these directions in conjunction with the landscape to navigate to where they need to go, and they had to find their way to their destinations on their own. Now, in principle, I definitely believe this is a great idea, one that greatly enhances the sense of adventure and exploration. In theory, this game mechanic should make up for the underwhelming beauty of the overworld and entice me to explore. But there is just one teeny problem. It doesn't work! If you're going to rely on written in-universe directions and aren't going to give the players a plan B to fall back on if the written directions fail, the quest directions you provide the player had better be spot on. Early in the game, the directions certainly worked. I was able to find the city of Balmora as well as Cassius Casade's house without too much difficulty. When the Fighters Guild sent me on a quest to clear out some rats from a Balmora resident's attic, the directions they gave me to get to that house were fairly easy to follow. But as the quest lines wore on, I could tell that the developers were growing increasingly weary of writing out all these tedious directions for the quests, as the quest directions offered became increasingly less and less specific. Eventually, the quest directions amounted to nothing more than a single cardinal direction and nothing more. Furthermore, some quest directions were just plain wrong, like the Mage's Guild quest Warlock's Ring, where the quest giver tells you that your destination was west of a certain ruin, when it was actually to the east. Granted, I find it very unlikely that the game developers purposefully lied to you in such a way just to troll you, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, if the quest directions simply do not work, then the entire game mechanic is broken.
Yeah, I can agree with that point. Okay, to try to play devil's advocate, have you ever tried to give someone directions and you happen to be wrong? Nah, fuck that, you're right. Bethesda dropped the ball on that one too. I also don't like how disorganized the journal is. The game seems to have the impression that once you get a quest, that means you're going to do it immediately. Because if you put a quest on the back burner then come back to do it later, you'll be hard pressed to find it again. To save time, you'll have to look for key words that vaguely refer to the quest that you want to get to. This can be an absolute nightmare, especially in the late game. They do have a search option, which can help, but if you've forgotten the name of your quest, then prepare to search every letter until you get it. The worst part is there's absolutely no way to bookmark your current quest. So if you are completing a quest that isn't the one on the front page, then to remind yourself of where to go, you'll have to flip through the book, page after page, again and again, until the journal updates. The journal even keeps details of completed quests next to active quests. This issue has polluted my experience a lot. Luckily, they fixed this later in the series.
Up until now, everything I've discussed about Morrowind are complaints that even its most diehard fans will usually concede to. However, the game's fans say that these flaws, although legitimate, are still worth it in the grand scheme of things because Morrowind's world building is so phenomenal as to be worth a purchase just on the world building alone. But even on that count, I still find Morrowind to come up short. Okay, so the lore behind the game is indeed very good. It's Elder Scrolls lore, so obviously the lore is phenomenal. Reading about how the Self-Striders are able to be ridden by manipulating the organs inside their massive bodies was certainly an interesting piece of world building. Learning about why the NPCs were calling me Outlander also gave the world some depth. However, while the lore in Morrowind was indeed very engaging, everything else about the game's storytelling fell flat on its ass. The primary means through which Morrowind attempts to tell stories to its audience is through its quest system. In recent years, Bethesda has gotten better at telling stories through strategic overworld and dungeon design, but in Morrowind, the quests are the primary means of telling stories. However, and again, I stress that this is all subjective, the quests in Morrowind just aren't very interesting.
Well, you are right, that is subjective. I'd still love to hear you justify your feelings, though. You just made a very bold statement, so I hope you can back it up because you have an amazing track record so far.
This video is already over length as it is, so to help illustrate my point, let me discuss one of the first quests you can do in the game that perfectly illustrates my point. The Seyda quest, Death of a Taxman. You head out into the marshes just outside Seyda and you come across a dead body. At this point, the quest certainly has the potential to be very interesting. However, it quickly falls short of its potential. You report your findings to some guy at the census office and he recommends you speak to his girlfriend for leads. She points the finger of blame at this guy named Foreign Gilneth, although she has no objective evidence other than the fact that he and her dead boyfriend never really saw eye to eye. Despite the fact that the evidence against him is flimsy to say the least, Foreign will openly confess to committing the murder, like he was proud of his deed. So you kill him, report your success to the census guy, and that's that. Quest complete. This had the potential to be grand and epic. Getting to the bottom of this murder could have been the A-plot of an entire faction quest line, as I explain in my mini-series on the ideal Elder Scrolls 6, link in the description if you're interested. Instead, it's just a throwaway quest where you hardly do any detective work and where the killer proudly boasts his murder. Nothing about this quest is even remotely realistic or interesting.
This is a mission you find in the beginning sections of the game. You can't be serious, man. Morrowind was the only hope for Bethesda to survive back then. They didn't have time to make every single quest an episode of Scooby-Doo.
Nearly every quest in the game is equally devoid of surprises or twists. At the start of every Fighter's Guild quest, you are told exactly where to go, exactly who to speak to, and exactly what to do to complete the quest, and absolutely nothing happens during any of these quests to actually shake things up. I'm sorry, but I much prefer Oblivion's and Skyrim's systems of only giving you starting objectives at the beginning of the quest, only for the quest to get occasional shake-ups every now and then. Morrowind sold over 1 million copies before Oblivion's release. Such massive sales gave Bethesda the funds to create their own publishing studio, which in turn gives them near complete creative freedom for all games from that point on. For that, I am grateful for what Morrowind achieved from a purely business perspective. However, playing the game myself, for my own enjoyment, I can't help but feel anything but tedium and boredom from this game. For the literal millions of you who love this game with the passion of 1,000 suns, I respect your opinion, just as I hope you respect mine, but I honestly do not see the appeal of this game by 2018 standards. The combat engine is boring, the graphics do not entice me to explore, which is the whole point of an Elder Scrolls game, and the quests are boring and predictable. The lore of the world is admittedly engaging and interesting, but that just means I could get the same experience by reading a wiki. And that will do it for today's video.
And we finally made it, guys. Oh boy, that was very hard to watch. Listen, Acerthorn, we need to have a talk, mano a mano, YouTuber to YouTuber. You got so much objectively wrong about the game that it made me seriously question if you even played it. See, this isn't just a problem with you. It's a problem I find very often with the video game review/critic community. A lot of them want to spout out their half-baked opinions, and then when they're asked to justify their feelings, they can't fucking deliver. It's just his opinion, man, so leave him alone. No, I won't. And I don't respect your opinion. I respect your right to have your opinion, but not the opinions alone. I agree with some of your points, but I wish you put more effort into getting your information right. You made a retrospective on a game and you only focused on how the game made you feel rather than what the game was. I mean, in the end, what do your criticisms really boil down to? There was too much brown, you don't like the combat, and the quests don't have interesting twists, and you don't like the soundtrack and the lack of voice actors and sound effects. You are a reviewer, Acerthorn. You have influence. Very little, but more than I have. You have the power to negatively or positively affect a piece of media and reshape the gaming landscape. When you talk, some people listen, and you help others articulate their personal feelings in a video format. You have the ability to change the perspective of others and open a discussion with like-minded or unlike-minded individuals to have. You gotta have some respect for that. But from what I've seen from this review, that shows me that you don't respect that. Everyone wants their opinion respected, but nobody respects their own opinions enough to make a sound argument. It seems like you were more concerned with going against the grain and saying something different, more than you were justifying these points you're making. I don't respect your stance, because based on this retrospective, it feels like you didn't even really give it a chance. You didn't give it a fair shot, and it's apparent. You took a bite out of the salad and didn't like it, and you blamed the entire meal for it. Now, I'll admit, Morrowind has its flaws. It's very rough around the edges. It's not even my favorite Elder Scrolls game. Oblivion is. But to make the implication that anyone who likes this game is just nostalgia blind is a very arrogant statement to make and just showcases a lack of perspective. Listen, I know this is your very first review and everything, and it was made 2 years ago. I'm sure you've gotten better down the line, and I respect the fact that you tried to ask the question, is Morrowind overrated? I respect what you were trying to do, but honestly, this ain't it, man. Earlier we talked about nostalgia and its effects on perception, but I think the opposite happened to you, man. I think you love the game that came after so much and its mechanics that you don't see the value in what came before. That can be just as, if not more dangerous to a review than nostalgia. But as I said, it's how you use it that matters. And that's the end of my video, guys. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and share and all that nonsense. And I'll see you all in the next video. Speaking of which, what's next on the chopping block? I'm ready for it. Oh god, here we fucking go. Well, until then, so long, farewell, leave me the fuck alone, and take care.